very informative video that Hank just told us about. I was taking notes while going through it because everywhere where he touched on a point, I have a video somewhere on YouTube where I have talked about those things in other areas as it relates to what's going on here in America domestically. And I'm going to give you some examples of some of those things. I'm going to talk a little bit about Ferguson. I'm going to talk a little bit about when I ran. But I want to say this to you, and you really need to hear these words. Our government is dangerous. These people are dangerous. They are folk that have threatened what they represent, and they have literally been killed for it. Can you say John F. Kennedy? John F. Kennedy went after the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Now, you know, I like to stick with low-hanging fruit. I don't try and present folk with stuff that's too far up there for them to get, because I don't want them calling me a conspiracy theorist. I don't want them telling me, you know, I wear a tinfoil hat. So I stay away from, you know, fluoride in the water, chemtrails. I don't need any of that, because I can deal with some of the, I can show you low-hanging fruit stuff, and it's easier for you to reach and grab. Google Northwoods. Operation, a real live false flag presented by the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Operation Ajax.
Our government. And John F. Kennedy rejected it and fired the general that was responsible for it. He also went after the CIA and some of the things that they were doing with the Bay of Pigs. Yep. This is our government. Now some of you will say, no, Derrick, no, come on, man. Our government doing something like that? No, I'm not going to buy that. Those people love us. I got my guy up there representing me. He's got my back. He's fighting for me. You know, I know good well they won't do any of those types of things. Have you forgotten slavery? I know that's an ugly one. But that was our government. But if you can't handle that, just go back and do Northwoods. See, I know our government is capable of some dastardly stuff. And what Hank just showed us, now it scared the hell out of me. I don't know about you, but I take even more serious what's taking place here in this country. Now, when I decided to run for Senate, he played you that video. I said it's not enough to wear a pin, wave a sign, and go and vote. That was 2 years ago, over 2 years ago. I said, you know what? Got to practice what you preach. So it wasn't enough to just go and speak and play and wear a sign and go vote. I decided to run. And I was told, Derrick, you can't win. Go run for one of those lower offices down there. You know, other people deserve. I was actually told this by members of the Republican Party. And Linda Evans, yeah, I named names. Went into her office and met with them. What are your intentions? Well, I'm going to run for the Senate. Like, you know, choose something else, you know, because other folk, it ain't your time yet. And we went back and forth, and I said, can I speak freely? Well, sure. What would you have me do? Well, run against Hank Johnson down there in the 4th District. Oh, you mean South DeKalb, down in that district, 4th District I live in, well, you really don't give a damn about what's going on down there. You don't care nothing about down there. You ain't never had it, and you know you ain't going to get it, but you want me out of the way. It sounds to me like what you're telling me, hey, we don't want you running against our pick from the royal, the establishment. We want you to go run against the nigga down there in the South. And that offends some of you, I'm sorry, but it is that ugly. And I was offended. And I said, God put me on this path. I will not be moved. Now, if you can't help me, that's fine, but get the hell out of my way. Because I am going to run. Friends told me, you can't run a statewide race. Watch me. I went all the way to May 20th. They did not stop me. And I'm not done yet. Because now I understand how they operate and I know how to beat them. There is a way to win, and we can win, but it's going to require some sacrifice, and I'm going to get to that. So that's what we're dealing with the Republican Party. What did I learn? The royals in both parties are both as corrupt as they can be, and they work together. That was lesson number 1. Lesson number 2, they have a toolbox. And in their toolbox, they have division, they have racism, and they have entitlements. They use entitlements as part of their power base. The Democratic Party boasts a 90% plus support of the American blacks. Without it, they wouldn't have the power that they have. How has that come into being? Largely because of entitlement programs and also other special interests such as gay agenda, okay, same-sex marriage, illegal immigration. So all of those social issues is where most of their power base comes from. Well then, Derrick, what is it with the Republicans? Oh, they've got theirs too. They have their piece of the pie that they work, and they just trade seats. I'll give you one good example, Obamacare. The Republicans in 2006 had the House, the Senate, and the White House. They had 8 years to do something about health care because we knew it was a concern for folk in America because it was talked about under Hillary Clinton, but shot down because Americans didn't want that. But they wanted something done. But here is one fundamental problem that most of us forget. First off, it ain't the federal government's place to fix health care. That's right. And the Republicans could have pointed that out, but they didn't. Then we get Obama and we get health care. And all through the debates, my opponents, I'm going to repeal Obamacare and I've got something to replace it with that's going to fix all of our problems. And I would stand up and say, you know, I want to repeal Obamacare as much as anybody else in here. But I don't want the federal government to replace it with anything. Amen. I want them to get out of the way. Yeah. But some of the people in the audience still could not grasp that, and I still couldn't understand why they couldn't grasp that. Let me talk about one of these other tools, division. We divide by class. Now, class is just as ugly as racism. It is just as ugly as racism. But we make that difference. What did Mr. Perdue say when he was talking about Karen Handel? Look, we got a lot of complicated problems up there in D.C., and all she's got is a high school education. You need somebody that's essentially a lot smarter than that with greater education, and I've got that. That's classism. I don't know nowhere in our Constitution where it said you had to have a Harvard degree or you couldn't have finished high schools. You know, the folk that used to go and represent us were the farmer down the street. They go do what they had to do, take care of their business, and they go back home. But now we have this culture of career politicians. So when he made that statement, that was ugly to me. When based on your platform, not stepping on somebody because all they have is a high school diploma, that is just as ugly as racism. But there are some people in this room that will still vote for Mr. Perdue because he won the primary. You'll still vote for him in spite of what the man represents. And that's going to get us to this other problem that we're talking about. Now let's talk about racism. This is not my grandfather's America. My grandfather grew up in a time, and his father, where the black man had very few choices. Two of those mainly was submit or die. But that's not the America that my father grew up in or that I grew up in. I grew up in an America full of opportunity, with the ability to overcome any obstacle if I just simply put my mind to it. That's the America that I live in, but people they want you to believe differently, which is why they are utilizing race in this Ferguson situation so that you will not focus on stuff like what Hank was talking about. They don't want you focused on that. They want people thinking that racism is alive and well. Are there racists in America? Of course there are. There will always be fools with us. Yes. They will never go away.
Oh, God, no, yeah.
But they don't make America. America overcame slavery by getting rid of it. America overcame Jim Crow by killing him. That is not America. This situation with Ferguson, you got a kid who was engaged in a criminal act, who made some bad choices, and he lost his life. It's as simple as that. But here's the ugly side of it that nobody will tell you. A black man's worst enemy in this country is to be murdered by another black man. 91% of the black men killed in this country are killed by another black man. Now that's an ugly truth that nobody wants to talk about. 12 million arrests a year. Out of that, an average of 400 are killed by police officers. And not all of them black, and most of them justified. But 91% of black men killed are killed by another black man. Now that is the truth. Where is the racism in that? With the exception of black on black crime. So don't fall for the nonsense about the race. Stop focusing on that stuff. Now see, that's what black folks' problem is. But I'm going to tell you what most of white folks' problem is. Because see, black folks have been conditioned to think that racism is alive and well. They count on that. That is how they stay in power, liberal Democrats. Well, how does the royals within the Republican Party stay in power? They count on white people to think that you still got it going on. Now, I'm going to say something that's going to be a little ugly, but don't be offended. White people in America are the new niggas. Let me explain to you why I say that. Gun control. Who owns most of the guns legally in this country? Middle-class white Americans. That's what gun control is about, taking your guns, knowing who you are, what you own, and where you live. They want to limit your access to weaponry. Crooks don't care about gun control. That's right. Who is the greatest percentage of the population in America? White people, 52, 53%. So who is being affected mostly now by unemployment? Because jobs are being offshored. Mostly middle-class white Americans. Unemployment always been high in the black community, but now it's starting to get white Americans. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. See, it's starting to come to you now. You need to wake up and smell the coffee. It's getting everybody now. Nobody is excluded from what the government is engaged in. Well then, Derrick, how did we get here? Why are we here? Well, I found out when I ran. When I ran, we had our second debate at KSU. And they did an online poll. Who won the debate? Derrick Grayson came in number 1. That was the last time they asked that question. Because they don't want you to know that. There's a thing called the circle of loot. Let me explain the circle of loot to you. This will tie directly to what Hank just demonstrated to you, resources and money. Back when Nixon was president and we had Watergate, we had a free press. Most TV, there were 3 big ones, ABC, NBC, CBS, and a lot of locally owned news outlets that did independent reporting. Reporters just wanted to report the truth to the people. What happened? They said, you know, in order for us to be able to control the people, we have to be able to control the message. Again, Hank, Facebook. Government uses Facebook, social media to manipulate. With the circle of loot, they manipulate what you hear in the press. Well, how does this work? Let me explain it to you. You got the 1%ers. They own the corporations. The corporation starts to buy up all of the media outlets. What do they need next? We need people that will do what we want them to do in D.C. Hank just showed you an image of a Politico sitting with some corrupt folk. Well, how do we keep them there? Well, we need to control the message to ensure that they are always elected or re-elected. Well, how do they do that? We will give money to PACs and super PACs. We'll present the illusion that we don't control anything, but we will promote them by giving this money to PACs and super PACs. What do the PACs and super PACs do? The PACs and super PACs will then back the candidates that they know will do their bidding. And guess what? Here's the good part. It doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat. We will give to both. Whichever one wins, they will engage in policies that will benefit us. Who? The corporations. Now guess what? When they run their newspaper ads, TV ads, radio ads, to manipulate the message that you're hearing, that money goes right back to the corporations that own those media outlets that they bought. That is the circle of loot. They never lose anything. They always gain, no matter if it's a Democrat or a Republican. Now, how is that possible that they can continue to win? Because they count on your ignorance. They count on the ability to use race as a divisive tactic amongst blacks. They count on the ability to use class as a divisive tool amongst whites. And they count on your not doing the research for yourself. That is how they remain in power. Now, what is the other part of that problem? I can stand up and tell you, I stood up on stage, all 7 debates, and in the last one, I wanted Hank to play that video, but I didn't get it to him in time. I said, I don't want you to be misled, so I won't pull any punches. I have asked all 6 of my opponents to state and pledge that they will obey 100% of the Constitution 100% of the time. Amen. And if I don't make it out of the primary, whoever that person is, I will give them my support. But this is the 7th and final debate, and no one has bothered to utter those words. Therefore, I will not vote for any of them. I will write myself in if it comes down to it. I will not be complicit in destroying this country by voting for people who don't have the nerve to stand up and say they will obey the Constitution 100% of the time. And that is the problem in this country. We continue to re-elect people that will not support 100% of the Constitution 100% of the time. Why? Fear. First off, we won't get involved. We won't pick up the phone and call somebody and tell them the truth. And the third thing, we caught up in my guy syndrome. Well, my guy is okay. My guy's fighting for me. If your guy were to tell you what Hank just told you about what's going on in D.C., do you think that the other folk that are responsible for it would continue to get re-elected? No, they wouldn't. One thing about Americans, if we know who's doing it to us, we'll take out the trash. But you got to know first. And these guys will not name names. They won't tell you who's doing it. They do everything under the cover of darkness. But there's still a way to win. There's still a way to win. Give you a guy who greatest example of it all, Martin Luther King. The black people told him, sit down, you can't change this. There's no way to beat Jim Crow. He said, oh, no, there's a way to win. But he was smart enough to realize that violence against violence doesn't work. He had to come up with a better way. So what did he do? He told the folk down there with the garbage trucks, stop picking up garbage. When you don't pick up the garbage, people's trash bag up. When people's trash bag up, their yards start to stink. When their yards start to stink, they start to call down the city hall. When they start to call down the city hall gets upset and worried because they might start losing money. it brought them to their knees. And they started paying them the same wages that they were paying their white counterparts. Same thing with the bus. So what is it we have to overcome to win in our situation? One, we have to educate folk by telling them the truth about their guy so that we can get them to understand you cannot be stuck on a party, whether it be a Democrat or a Republican. You need to abandon that. Anybody that will not support 100% of the Constitution 100% of the time, do not vote for them, ever. If they have a voting record that is not 100% constitutional. Now I can sit here and ask everybody in here, okay, out of 100% of the Constitution, how much are you willing to give up? Nobody will raise their hand. I said, I tell you what if I give you 90%? Nobody will still raise their hand. Everybody will say, well, I want 100% of the Constitution. Yet, you will still vote for David Perdue. Many of the folk voted for Jack Kingston, and I have verifiable, documented proof where Jack Kingston voted for legislation that violated your Fourth Amendment protections. I got it on government letterhead, and it cannot be denied, but people still voted for him. Now, I don't know if they voted for him out of ignorance. I don't know if they voted for him because they're caught up in my guy syndrome. Either way, that is what is killing this country. Now, here's the good news. I traveled the state. I probably came in contact with 20,000 people. That's being very generous. It might be closer to 10. But in that coming in contact, every room I went in, when I talked about the Constitution, people could feel me. They knew where I was coming from because they understood what the Constitution is all about. They got it. But the press didn't talk about that. And that's the bigger challenge which I'll get to. They didn't want the masses to hear about the Constitution. They didn't want them to know that there was a guy talking about obeying 100% of the Constitution 100% of the time. They didn't want them to hear that because that goes against the grain of what the royals are doing in D.C. And what Hank was just talking about didn't just start under Obama. That's another thing I get sick of. Now, I despise his policies, but his policies go back to Bush. This may as well be Bush's fourth term. We got one man that would have been president for 16 years and another man that has been pretending to be a black man that has been living large for 8. And that's what it comes down to. So the press didn't want that out there, and that's part of that circle of loop. Now this guy you don't talk to. Whoever he touches, let it be just the people at the debates and at the meetings. And we'll shut him out that way. But 6,300 people that I know I touched, either directly or through somebody else, went and cast a ballot for me. 6,300 because I was able to reach them. Because they understood the Constitution. And if they didn't understand the Constitution, when I revealed to them the truth about what was taking place, they said, you know what, maybe I need to pay attention. Well, the $64,000 question is how do we turn 6,300 into 250,300 votes the next election that are running? It's going to take you. We have to overcome their greatest tool, and their greatest tool is the media. He just explained to you how they manipulated, what was the first number, 200,000? 300,000, what was the first number?
Number of people that got
Yeah, I know 800,000 was the second number.
100,000 showed up first.
100,000 was the first one, 800,000 was the second. We have to be able to counter that. And the only way we counter that is by getting up, taking our cross upon our shoulders, and going out and educating others. I have been silent for the last 3 months, resting and recuperating and getting ready for the second battle. And that second battle is Operation Educate, to educate folk so that next time around we can overcome the media. We have all kinds of constitutionally loving individuals that have run for office, that's running for office like Ted Metz, but they have no chance because the political machine, the circle of loot that manipulates, divides, and conquers folks is strong, it's massive. But just like Martin Luther King could beat Jim Crow, just like Abraham Lincoln was able to get the whole of the Republican Party to overcome slavery and grant the Emancipation Proclamation, just like those folk who got upset over that 3% tax down there, up there in Boston, and went and threw it in the water, which led to the revolution, giving us our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, our Bill of Rights. Just like all of those situations, they found a way to win. But it may literally mean somebody got to die to do it. And that is the problem with the people that you have been elected. They're not willing to die to preserve the liberties and freedoms that many of you have enjoyed in this country. But unless you do your part, unless you start electing people that are willing to die, to preserve, to honor, protect that Constitution, there will be nothing left for your children. And you're going to need some people like me. Because as Hank said earlier, if we don't get somebody in there that's willing to do the right thing, that's willing to die for it, and they continue on with the Federal Reserve, none of this will even matter. Because we will implode. It's just a matter of time. That is how critical this is. But the folk up here at the top, they aren't concerned about what happens with the Federal Reserve because they are covered. It's you and I who are not covered. And that's why I told you, white people are now the new niggas. It's going to get y'all. The experiment worked in the black community. 7 out of 10 babies are born out of wedlock.
Jesus.
Most black women don't even bother to get married. High school dropout rate greater than 60% for black males. Black teenagers are more likely to be killed by another black than they are of natural causes. I could go on and on and on with these statistics. But that is all a result of liberal Democrat policies. Now the Republican Party that I once knew, it no longer exists. The Royals have co-opted it. Now, when I say the Republican Party, please note that I'm talking about the Royals. Most Republicans in the Republican Party still believe in those same principles that I believe in, which is why I will not leave the Republican Party. I will stay in the Republican Party. I will die trying to clean it up. And that's where I stand. Thank you.